Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. Part number 4 of the build tutorial. This one's going to be a little bit different after studying the instructions here a little bit more and seeing where we were at, where we left off in part 3. I've got to do a couple of things that's going to be off camera, but I'm going to explain what I'm going to do and reasons why. So what we have where we left off from part 3 is the assembled engine, or most of it, the long block, I guess you could say, with the transmission. And I went ahead and did all my sanding on all my parting lines, checked to make sure I got all the mold lines and stuff out. And then we shot this with a coat of the Napa Colorline primer, gray primer. And see if we can get a little bit closer here. You can see the detail that's in the engine. Very nice detail. Came out pretty good. Got all the lines and everything out of it. So this part's looking real nice as is. And another little tip is you'll notice that I have a toothpick in the front of the engine where the belt goes on. And normally your belt assemblies are all going to be black. Most times the pulleys and stuff are black too. So the reason why I tend to go into the front of the engine is if you take a toothpick a lot of times and you slide back here where the drive shaft's going to go in and you push that toothpick in, it takes a chance of busting this seam open back here on your transmission. And that's usually a pretty thin area where they neck it down right there at the back of the transmission. So if you can avoid it, try not to put the toothpick in the back. In this particular transmission, there's also one where it mounts underneath. You could put it in there, but I like to, if the one is open here at the front, I like to stick the toothpick in there. You don't take a chance of splitting the seam open because this is a one-piece timing cover. So that's a little trick to remember. So we've got all this in primer, and like I say, the long block and the transmission and everything is ready for paint. Now, the one thing that I was looking at on the next steps that we have is the belt assembly, and we also have the power steering pump, the AC compressor, and the alternator. And those parts, the alternator is basically just a round piece of plastic is all it is. Now, the alternator, of course, is going to be a duller aluminum, or if you're going for more of a shiny, street rod style engine, then that would be something like a polished aluminum or something like that. So that's going to have to be painted separate from your belt assembly. Also, it's going to need to be cleaned up. The mold lines and stuff need to be cleaned up in it. Same thing with the belt assembly. And I was looking at the power steering pump, and the side that is facing forward, this side here on the power steering pump, it has a recessed injector pin mark that's going to have to be filled and sanded down. So instead of boring everybody on camera with that and cleaning up the mold lines and stuff, I've already showed you how I go about doing it. That's just one of them things as you're building along on your kit. Look for those kind of things, and they will take a little bit of time to do. But I'm not going to do a whole video of me sitting here just sanding out injector pin marks and mold lines and things like that. We've already touched on that subject. So, and then the other things that we have to add to the engine are the valve covers, the upper intake, the water crossover, and the headers. There again, on the headers, they have mold lines in them that need to be cleaned up, and then they get glued together. I'll go ahead and get all the mold lines cleaned up off of camera. We'll glue them together on camera to show you how the pieces fit, and then we'll install them on the engine itself. And on the upper intake, they have it in chrome. Now, when I got to looking at this particular engine, the lower part of the intake is actually cast in the white plastic. It's the same color as the head. If you're going to use this chrome upper intake, the bottom runners would also have to be chrome on this. They go down to the head. So what I'm going to do is, since I don't normally use kit chrome anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do the intake basically like in a polished aluminum, something like that. But that's not something for this tutorial. It's not something that I recommend for the beginners going in stripping the chrome and doing alclad finishes or spastics or anything like that. So, but that's the only reason I'm going to do it. Plus, there's a couple mold lines right on the front side of the intake that need to come off. And like I say, this model will also go into competition for me, so I have to make sure I address all the basics. But if you were just building this, this is your first model, second or third model, you could go ahead and glue this chrome piece on the engine as is if you're not going into competition. Same thing with the valve covers. The LT5 engines always came with the pretty much the whole engine was silver, including the upper intake and the valve covers. So I'll probably do the same treatment on the valve cover, something like a Spastics or a, polished aluminum metallized or something like that. So I'll get the stuff cleaned up and we'll get those sprayed and then we'll glue them on the engine. I will show you those steps. And then we'll also be putting a black wash on this engine. So that's going to be something that's going to pop out all the detail on it. So we'll do that on camera. And what else do we have on the engine steps? That's it. That once we get that done, and then we also have the ignition module. That's the last thing. And I noticed that it needs some cleanup also. So we're going to get that cleaned up. That's an actual gets painted a semi-gloss black and goes on the back part of the lifter valley there. So we're going to do a lot of that, the prep work and the quick painting of that stuff off camera. And then we'll have all those parts ready to go. And when we come back on for the next episode on the engine, we'll go ahead and glue those parts on. And I'll tell you some things along the way that I've done to each individual part. And then we'll do the black wash on it, show you how that comes out. And as a beginner, you don't actually have to do the black wash. It's one of those things. There's a lot of pre-mixed ones out there nowadays, real simple to do. I'll show you what I use. And, if you want to try it on your first one, it's a good thing. It brings out a lot of detail. So let's see. Question that we had come up. I had a question on the Tamiya extra thin cement. Wanted to know if this has a good bonding strength. Yes, it does. All these liquid cements are going to melt your plastic. That's how the bond is done. It's, you put it down, and what it does is it melts the two pieces of plastic together. So once this stuff is dry, it has a very good bond strength to it. The same as, this other one that we used on a couple of parts, much stronger than super glued parts. Super glue has no shear strength to it. You could take those two blockheads and glue them together with super glue, and I can just pop them right back apart once they're dry. With this liquid cements, they've pretty much blended into one, and they're very difficult to get back apart. So I think that pretty much covers it on the engine assembly for the time being. What we will do is probably go ahead and get those parts cleaned up so we can do the next part of the engine, finish that up, or for the most part, finish that up. And then we will be moving on to the wheel and tires. I'm going to show you how to sand the treads on those and a couple little pointers I have for, static models as far as wheels and tires. And then we move into starting on the chassis. So that's all we've got for this video. I want to thank everybody for all the interest so far in it. And we're going to continue to keep moving forward with this build and hopefully get it done in a reasonable amount of time. And if any of you guys out there that are newer to the hobby, that are watching these videos, have any questions at all, definitely leave the question on the video. I will see it. And, or you can send me a PM or a message, through the channel. And we'll definitely try to answer all your questions as we go along with this. So that's it for this one. Until next time, this is Hunter from Showtime Studios, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.